So if you stop and think a minute, Barack Obama said these people clung to their guns. He just ridiculed them. Joe Biden has called them chumps. Hillary Clinton said they were irredeemables. Or Peter Strzok says, I went into Walmart and it smelled like Trump people. So when you go after them, how long will they take it? They're playing with fire. Their recruitments in the U.S. Army are down 45%. The left always operated on the premise that they were the critical intellectual elite, but was always the assumption that there was always some guy fracking oil. There was always a guy to fix their car. You wanted a nation build in Iraq. There was always a guy in rural Pennsylvania that's family had been 4 generations from World War II to Korea to Vietnam, and he was going to go over there and God knows where and die for this agenda. And when you start attacking those people that make the country run, it's everybody of the middle and working muscular class. That's who kept the country going. Because now what's happening, you're starting to see a subtle but definite trend that people feel there's a war against them.
You started out as a Marxist, as many young people do in colleges and universities, and it didn't take long for you to realize, wait a minute, this isn't all that it's cooked up to be. Was this social justice stuff and this inequality stuff, these terms, these ambiguities, did that have an impact on you first being a Marxist and then realizing, wait a minute, this is all BS?
One of the big problems about the social justice field is that what they say sounds so good. It's only after you study history that you find out just how bad, how horribly it actually turned out. They seem to assume a world in which if things don't turn out the same for everybody, that means that somebody has done somebody wrong. There's nobody out there who has all the incredible amount of knowledge required to take over making other people's decisions for them. 30 years ago, I wrote a book called Inside American Education. All of this was laid out just exactly as it's happening now. There are groups outside the school system and inside the school system who want to do this and who know that the parents don't want them to do it, and they do it anyway. Once I was at a meeting of educators. There was a man who was going around the country selling a particular brainwashing program, and he showed me his schedule, and he was scheduled, my gosh, for every 2 or 3 days for months to be pushing this stuff in all the schools. It's clear this is not a spontaneous thing. This is organized. The tactics used are the tactics that were developed for brainwashing in communist countries. There are people who've taught academic courses at Harvard and other places who just simply stopped teaching their courses because if they were saying anything that was different from what the propagandists were saying, you would have violence on the campus and so on. You had ignorance silencing knowledge.
You've been studying our country for a very long time. 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Was the country in a better position today than it was half a century ago, or is it in a worse position today?
Oh, much worse, much worse. It's hard for me to see just how we're going to come out of this. People who are so willing to increase the powers of government don't seem to understand that it doesn't matter for what purpose you gave them that power, which may have been good purposes. Once they have that power, they can use it for whatever they want. The Federal Reserve System was set up, for example, to prevent runaway inflation or runaway deflation or bank failures. There's been more deflation, as in during the Great Depression, and more inflation for decades on end, and more bank failures than ever occurred prior to the setting up of the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve System, for example, can force people to do things they don't want to do.
The culture of traditional societies, as opposed to an individualistic rat race, everyone is out for himself type of lifestyle that you live in the West. And that's because of the hegemony that we're talking about, because of liberal secularism, because of this pursuit of happiness at the expense of all else. Look at the divorce rates. Look at how, I have 5 sons of my own. I'm very worried about, will they even be able to find a wife who will be faithful to them and who will want to have children, my grandchildren? Look at all of the social problems that are infecting Western societies. Why is that? I'd argue it's on the basis of leaving traditional Christianity, leaving traditional Islam, reforming these religions. That's the problem. The West has declared war on every traditional society. If you don't implement Western style liberal human rights, quote unquote, like you don't legalize homosexuality, you don't legalize transgender, you don't legalize feminism, all these things that are destroying marriage and family, we're going to bomb you. We're going to sanction you. We're going to starve your people. It's not safe for Muslims to be in Muslim countries. It's not safe for traditional Christians. Traditional Christians quoting the Bible within Europe are being put in prison for quoting the Bible. They'll literally quote a verse from Leviticus, or they'll talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. They're put in prison. This is a war on all traditional religions.
Everything we are enjoying today, it came from the West. For example, women's rights came from the West. Abolishing slavery came from the West. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion came from the West.
I think we live in an American revolutionary style moment where we have to revive the answer to that question of what does it mean to be an American? I think it means you get ahead, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions, that you work hard, you put in the effort, that nobody's going to stop you from achieving the maximum of your God-given potential. Hard work, self-commitment, dedication, speaking your mind freely at every step of the way. These are distinctly American ideals. That's what unites us, not our different shades of melanin. We got 3 different shades of melanin around here. Great. Why does that matter? It means nothing if there's nothing greater that unites us. The people who we elect to run the government today, they're not the ones who run the government. That's a joke.
Yeah.
That's a farce. It's the bureaucrats and the 3-letter agencies, what Trump and others have called the deep state. I think we need revolution.
You said something earlier about the Department of Education. They're only providing like funding to certain schools.
So the way it works is, you've probably heard in the last few years, you've had parents showing up at school board meetings pushing back against some of these toxic curricular items like radical gender ideology or racial indoctrination in the schools. The dirty little secret is it's not just coming from the local school boards. It's coming because they're responding to the incentives from the federal government. And it's a meaningful part of the budget. It could be 10, 12, 15% of the budget. That says you don't get that money unless you're meeting some of these toxic criteria.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a fact.
That's a fact. And then you think, oh, I'm going to blame the people in Congress, those dirty politicians, and they're dirty. You're missing the point. They're not even the guys who make the laws, really. It's the people who we never elected who are in that bureaucracy. They're the ones that are actually wielding the actual keys to power.
These 3 giant companies, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, those 3 companies, they own 88% of the S&P 500. So they already own everything. And now they've decided they're going to buy every single family home in America. They're on track now to own 60% of the single family homes in America within 6 years. Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock, is also on the board of the World Economic Forum. Their mantra is, we're going to have this great reset. What does that mean? It means that you will own nothing and you will be happy.
You'll be happy.
Our kids are now competing against BlackRock. So BlackRock has a bottomless bank book. Well, they own all the banks. They own all the credit card companies. It's not right. And, you know, we have an American dream in this country. The promise as World War II, your parents' generation, my parents' generation, if you worked hard, if you played by the rules, you could have 1 job, not 3. And you could own a house, you could take a summer vacation, you could raise a family, and you could put away money for retirement. That is just not even for anybody. That is not true.
It's over now.
And if you don't own a home, you don't care about your community. You don't care about the schools. You don't care. You know,
You're less vested.
And you also have no access to capital because, you know, if you are a homeowner and you want to start a small business and you want to take a risk, you get a second mortgage on your home and you have some access to capital because you have an asset.
People that are not homeowners are subject to the rising rents.
And the ownership by these companies is driving up the cost of rents. 48% of the people in this country who are renting have anxiety. Fewer than half of those people are making enough money to pay for basic human needs for food, transportation, and housing. After World War II, we built a middle class that became the greatest economic generator in the history of mankind. We owned half the wealth on the face of the earth because of the American middle class. And now we're tearing it apart. That's one of the reasons for the Ukraine war is that we're loaning $140 billion to Ukraine, and they're paying it back through austerity programs. And it's part of our contract where they have to put all the farmland in Ukraine up for sale. It's called a land market. BlackRock is over there buying, the corporations have snapped up 28% of this, the richest farmland in the world.
Historians call it micro-militarism. It's where late empire engages in military adventurism in a desperate bid to reclaim a past dominance. And that's what we're seeing. Anybody, even from the outside, can see the social unraveling in the United States. The opioid crisis that takes 100,000 lives a year. Half the country doesn't even have $400 in their bank account to handle an emergency. It's the collapse of our healthcare system. You can see the social disintegration and the very rapacious and lethal force of, as I mentioned before, these militarized police that function as internal armies of occupation. We are the most spied upon, watched, monitored, photographed population in human history.